hey, I know you're only in first year, but you can do this. Oh my gosh, like there is so many things to do.
Hello and welcome to Critters and Cultures, the podcast where we explore the fascinating intersection of animal welfare and cultural diversity. I'm your host, Dr. Azalia Boyd, ready to uncover how cultural differences influence, enhance, and sometimes challenge the way we care for animals and relate to each other. Join us on this journey through global traditions, learning from diverse perspectives and advocating for empathy and respect in all our interaction. Thank you so much for joining me on another episode of Critters and Cultures. If something resonates with you during the podcast today, please feel free to send me a direct message, comment below, or you can join our Critter and Cultures circle. I must say that Critters and Cultures has been pretty lucky to have back-to-back phenomenal guest after phenomenal guest. Today is no different. We have a young lady whose journey through different cultures and education systems has provided her with unique insights into the world of her chosen career path with animals. Eve Borel was born in New York, spent her formative years in Trinidad, and has lived in Toronto and Grenada. Today, she's here to share her experiences and perspectives on how cultural heritage and education have shaped her path to wanting to be a veterinarian. Welcome to the show, Eve Borel.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. It's my first ever podcast, so it's a super exciting experience. Yeah, and like you said, like I've had a lot of different cultural backgrounds that shaped my journey. I'm currently a veterinary student at St. George's University in Grenada. I'm in my first year, and I came to Grenada from Canada, but that's not where my story ends. Like you said, I was born in New York. I lived in the States for the first 7 years of my life, and I lived in Trinidad for 9 years. So my Caribbean culture is a huge part of who I am. And while Grenada is not Trinidad, it's really nice to be back in the Caribbean and learning the thing that I've been wanting to learn for the past couple of years. So it's a super exciting journey.
I love that. Okay, so before I start asking all the in-depth questions, right, I do want the listeners and the audience to get to know you a little deeper. So I'm going to start with an icebreaker question, okay? And I love that this is your first podcast. Hoping many, many more for you. Okay, so here's your icebreaker question. If there was one food or dish from Trinidad and Tobago that you absolutely could not live without, what would it be?
That is a hard one because I'm a big foodie. Like, I love my food, but I would have to say it would have to be bus-up shot, which is like basically like broken up roti skin if you ever had it with curry on the side, just because it's just so good.
I'm gonna agree. So you know that my stepfather is from Trinidad. So you are representing the Caribbean culture, the Caribbean masses on this podcast today. I actually have something for you here. I'm gonna wave this flag. This is your flag, girl. This is your flag. This is your flag. Okay, all right, perfect. Thanks so much for sharing. So tell us a little bit about your background and the various places you lived. So you said New York, Trinidad, Toronto, now Grenada. Tell us what that was like for you.
Yeah, and I love that because I think that moving around so much, it definitely made me adaptable to being in new environment. Because like I said, when I left the States, we were actually living in Connecticut at the time. I was 7. And then I had to start school in Trinidad, and things were completely different. In Trinidad, most of the schools there are also unisex, or they also have a religious affiliation with them. So moving like as an American student basically to Trinidad, also I sounded completely different from everybody in the school. So I feel like I quickly started putting on my Trini accent more and more, even compared to my mom or anything, because that's who I was around all the time. And it was just, I love Trinidadian culture. It was a lovely experience for me. But yet again, I went through the same thing from when I moved to Trinidad to Toronto to finish high school. It was like, okay, now I'm in a new place. Everyone thinks that I say things in a funny way, and I have to adjust culturally again. So code switching became like a huge part of me, who I am. Yeah, and then now, like, coming back to Grenada, it's interesting because the school that I go to is an American private school on the island. So most of my peers are American students, but yet at large, I'm surrounded by Caribbean people. So then on a daily now, I'm code switching, like, depending on who I'm talking to. Like, if I'm talking to somebody in the grocery store versus if I'm talking to one of my classmates.
Code switching is interesting because usually you hear that as, a term, should you do it? Should you code switch? Is there a reason to code switch? What do you think the benefits of code switching for you is?
For me, it's definitely connection, because when I talk to somebody here who may assume like, oh, she's an SGU student, she's just American, she doesn't know anything. When they hear my accent come out, I feel like they're much more open with me and they're like, oh, where are you from? Da, 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 da. They want to know more about me. So I love that. And it allows me to still connect with them because how we speak is a huge part of who we are. Unfortunately, some people, they're like, oh, if you can't do the Caribbean accent, like you're not a true Trini or you're not a true Caribbean person. So I think I always felt that deep down because my accent's always been tinged by Americanness, or my American accent's always been tinged by my Caribbeanness. But I just love the connection because the same thing with my American peers here, they can come and ask me questions about Caribbean culture that they might be more open to ask me just because they know like I can relate to them a bit more and maybe explain it to them in a way that they would understand and also make comparisons. I'm like, yeah, they do it here, but it's kind of similar to how they do it there. And so
I love that.
I really love the connection that it forms for me.
It's good that people want to know more, right? It's good that people want to know more about you. I know when we spoke a few weeks ago, when you came with your accent, that there were some misconception or biases that people with accents maybe didn't have the best education.
Yeah, for
Tell me
sure.
about
When I
that.
moved to Toronto, because I started grade 12 there. So, sorry, grade 11. So I went right into grade 11 when I moved to Toronto from Trinidad. And that was from me basically finishing high school in Trinidad because Trinidad's a bit more similar to the British system. So we have O levels and A levels, if you're familiar with that. So you finish O levels when you're about 16, 17. So that's what I finished in Trinidad. And then I came to Canada to finish high school because I knew that that's where I wanted to go to university. And it was really interesting at first because, a lot of people don't know much about the Caribbean. And it's either just to them what they see online or the little part of the island that they do see when they come for vacation. And I had people asking me if I slept in hammocks. They were really surprised to know that my educational background was so strong from the Caribbean. And they were honestly really shocked that this girl from Trinidad came to school and she was doing so well in like the science courses and everything. And then I let them know, I'm like, guys, our educational system is pretty rigorous. Like I learned a lot of this stuff already. I just have to retake it because I need the grades to apply for university. And then I saw the switch to them being like, oh, you're at an advantage because you came from the Caribbean. And they're like, I wish you're only in this position because you came from the Caribbean. If I went to school in Trinidad, I would be getting those grades too. And I'm well, that's
right. Well,
interesting to hear for sure.
It's a pretty interesting bias, like this whole misconception that the education system that the students receive in the Caribbean isn't as strong as other parts of the world. But knowing that, and because I grew up in a Caribbean household, right? I was raised very much probably like you were. You were probably a lot more rigorous than my household, but education system in the Caribbean is rigorous and it's shaped by discipline and respect. Whenever I go to the Caribbean, my mom is from Jamaica, so I will see the students in uniforms, right? Everyone's in a single file line. There's a lot of order, right? Especially when it comes to education. And Caribbean parents and communities, they expect nothing less than excellence, right?
Exactly.
This is what they expect. Nothing less than excellence. And
that is your job as a child. You go to school and you get the good grades.
Exactly. And, understandably, right? We understand that education is kind of this gateway to better opportunities, to maybe getting off the islands, right? And going and exploring the world. So while people assume that Caribbean education aren't well paired, they obviously found out when you moved to Toronto.
Yeah.
So that is awesome. So tell me about your path to veterinary medicine. When we spoke, I did share with you that that was not a career choice that my parents necessarily wanted me to go into originally. They thought it was unique. I even had an uncle at one point ask me, when was I going to be a real doctor after becoming a veterinarian? You also experienced that, this push toward human medicine, right?
Yeah, for sure. Because like I said, I was doing well in school. I was on that science med pathway. And that was just, I loved medicine. So that was kind of just the sector that I was funneled into. But when I was doing my undergraduate degree, and I actually had the opportunity of having a few human medicine doctors as mentors, I realized, I was like, maybe this isn't the career for me. Like, do I love this as much as I was told I should love this just because I like biology and I like other certain things? And I've had a similar experience with one of my uncles, actually, when I did actually finally decide to go into veterinary medicine. A few of my uncles, actually, who are also Jamaican, and they were just confused. They're like, an animal doctor? Why you want to be an animal doctor? Not a human doctor. And then they're kind of like, who's going to give me medical care if you can only treat animals?
Right.
So they're also thinking from their perspective, they're like, this is my niece. How is she going to become a doctor but not going to be able to help me in my own health issues? So that was definitely an interesting perspective.
Yeah.
But
the funny thing is,
I would
I'm
say
sure they still ask you. Like, I'm sure they still ask you about their own health issues.
yeah.
I still get that. I'm like, I treat dogs and cats and snakes, you guys, you know?
Yeah, they definitely, I think they understand more. Like, I get the pet questions a lot now, but also I'm like, guys, I'm in my first year in vet school. I'm literally, I don't know anything yet.
I just
I can give you
started.
like basic,
Yeah.
basic advice, but not veterinary
Where do you
treatment.
think that came from? Where do you think that comes from? And we're in the same culture, right? So where do you think that comes from in our Caribbean heritage? What is this? This whole about wanting to be a real doctor. Why isn't veterinarians recognized as a profession, a real profession for us to get into? What do you think that's from?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question because I think in the Caribbean, especially, I know it's worldwide, but such a high value is placed on human doctors. Like, that is the career. People look at it as a way, as a means to break socioeconomic boundaries, to help your family. And I just don't think that most Caribbean people correlate veterinarians with that same regard. So even me, like when I was living in Trinidad, we had 2 Cocker Spaniels at a time, and I don't remember the veterinarian there sitting down, ever having conversations or valuing them in that regard, because a lot of people in the Caribbean also take more ownership, I think, over the health and treatment of their pets. So they'll try and treat stuff at home or do stuff at home rather than pay a veterinarian for a service. And just generally, I think that in the Caribbean, veterinarians, because a lot of people don't have personal pets like dogs and cats, well, they see them as extensions of their families, but not that they value their health in a sense to take them to the doctor. Veterinarians are usually for the farm animals.
Right.
And people tend to look down in the Caribbean on that work a bit more, unfortunately, than maybe how a veterinarian is perceived in North America, who has an establishment and like a business that they work out of, and they can see all their fancy equipment and everything. But unfortunately, because of just the approach to pets that is changing in the Caribbean, I've noticed a lot lately, but it's just not as valued as much.
Yeah. And so I feel like most Caribbean students kind of go through the same little struggle, but once we get there, we're like, we've reached it. This is our dream and this is what we want to do because we do love animals and we want to, quote unquote, play with cats and dogs all day. But you're right. It's this push to fields like medicine, law, engineering, right? Those are considered more prestigious, more stable as a go-to, right? Like you said, for financial security. And another good point that you mentioned is that the farm animals, right? In the Caribbean, animals are seen more practical, use for food, use for work, rather than companion animals from what I've experienced. I was always the one pulling in cats, dogs, rat, you name it. If I could catch it, it was coming in my house, it was coming in my closet. And they never understood that. But I was fortunate to have great parents that eventually was like, this is what she wants to do. Let's just go ahead and pour into this because she's our special crazy child. But yeah, and I mean, I know that in the Caribbean, like you said, it's not something that that you see a lot. So you had dogs, but you don't remember necessarily going and speaking to the veterinarian, right? So
Exactly. And just like I said, like I had two Cocker Spaniels at a point in time. And I remember how shocked our Trini friends and family would be when they came over to our house. They're like, you let your dogs inside? Like they're not just outside dogs because
yeah,
like you said, most animals are used in a practical sense. And a lot of people have dogs as protection or guard dogs that are mainly just kept outside of their house.
yeah,
So people would be completely shocked when they would see my dog
in the house.
sitting down in the living room.
But you know what's funny is one thing that I can say is that I have not seen a level of disregard for their lives, right? It's like
Yeah.
my mom is like, get that dog away from me. But then if she sees the dog in the yard for too long, she'll say, is he going to stay outside? It's too hot. She's worried about him. She shows care and love. But yeah, that's the Caribbean way, right? You're the Caribbean.
Exactly. And I think that brings up an important point of just recognizing that cultural diversity because like you said, that doesn't mean that they have a disregard for their life or their health. Even I know being in Grenada right now and going to vet school here, a lot of the American vet students struggle to see how some of the Grenadians treat their animals because here a lot of the houses don't have fences. Some of the dogs might generally roam around their neighborhood. They have collars, their own, but they live a bit more independent life than some of the dogs in North America are used to. And some of the students see that and they're like, oh my gosh, they don't care about their animals. They're just letting them go free. But they do care. If something were to happen to those animals, they would be very concerned.
Yeah.
But that's also culturally the life that is okay for dogs here.
Right.
It's not looked down upon. They just have a bit more independent lifestyles than we're used to.
When you say independent lifestyle, it reminds me of many times I've been in the Caribbean and I see dogs looking both ways where they cross the street, okay? They are completely independent. They know how to cross the street. They know where they're going.
Yes.
They know how to get back home, right? So they go and see their friends and all of that. So you were recently awarded a scholarship from DVMC, Diversify Vet Med Coalition. Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Speaking of culture and all of this, what did receiving this scholarship actually mean to you, both personally and professionally?
I think, personally, it definitely showed me that I should always try for things. I should always go for it. I know sometimes as students, we're so overwhelmed with the little things or just, people further in our career. We're like, oh, maybe I shouldn't put in that application. Maybe I shouldn't try for that. So I'm really glad that I did end up applying for that scholarship. I didn't think that I would have won it, but I did. And it was an amazing experience. They paid for me to go to the AVMA conference and I got connected with so many different vets and I even got to speak at the convention that happened in Austin a few months ago, which was just mind-blowing to me. I couldn't believe that I was having that experience and it meant so much to me professionally as well because it kind of just reminded me I do have a place in veterinary medicine. As a young Black girl going into veterinary medicine, it definitely was hard to imagine where I would fit in just because the diversity statistics scared me a lot. I have to say just that I would look at schools and look at their past graduation pictures and I was just like, there's nobody that looks like me there. Is anyone am I gonna have peers or co-workers who I'll be able to relate to culturally? And, that was difficult for me, but I think it's so important the work that organizations like Diversify Veterinary Medicine Coalition is doing to remind me and other people that there are opportunities in veterinary medicine and you can find the path that you're meant to be on. So professionally, it was just amazing to meet veterinarians who I never would have met if I didn't have that opportunity, who supported me and who were like, hey, I know you're only in first year, but you can do this. There's so many different paths. And just it reminded me about the expansive nature of veterinary medicine. I walked into the AVM convention and I was like, oh my gosh, there is so many things to do. I don't think I could ever be bored with this career. If there is a path, you could make the path, whatever you want to do.
That
for
is
sure.
very touching, and thank you for sharing that. And I'm sure that you have just inspired, somebody who was having those same thoughts. So I definitely appreciate that. So congratulations again on that. So you're in Grenada, streaming in from
Yes.
Grenada today. And
Yes, my AC is on, so I'm not
and
sweating.
I am in a sweater, okay? I am in a sweater and your AC is on. I love that. I love that. Grenada is a beautiful island. I've never been, but I've heard that it is amazing. It's also known for its rich cultural significance and rich traditions. Share your experience. You told me that since being in Grenada, you went to Grenada's Carnival. Trinidad's
Yes.
Carnival is one of the biggest, maybe like in the top three. I want to say Brazil, then maybe Trinidad, and maybe Canada.
Mhm.
Don't quote me. But part of the Caribbean culture is Carnival, where, everyone dresses up. There's lots of partying. There's, expansive costumes that are super colorful and beautiful. And there's parties in the street. Tell
Yep.
me about Grenada's Carnival. You told me something about Jab Jab. Let's talk about that.
Grenada's Carnival usually happens like in August. And, there's pre-carnival festivities, which involve all the parties and stuff that you're talking about. But more than that, they have a lot of competitions for soca songs. So soca is like the traditional Caribbean carnival music that they make. And so they have competitions for that. They have kiddies carnival. So the little kids get involved.
Yeah.
And the costumes get marked and everything.
Yeah.
And then they have the big finale, which is the carnival. So it starts with Juve, and Juve comes from the French word ouvert, to open. So it's the opening of carnival. And that's when Jab Jab happens, which Grenada is known for. That is Grenada's thing. And in Jab Jab, that's really an expression of freedom that we partake in. We start it in the middle of the night. So you go out around like 2, 3 a.m. and it happens all the way until the sun rises until about 8 and 9 a.m. And people paint themselves with black paint or traditionally using motor oil. People wear horns. You might see people with chains. And really what this is an expression of freedom from slavery. So going back to the history of Carnival, when Carnival first happened in the Caribbean, Carnival was done by the white people who were part of the ruling class in the Caribbean. So it was something that slaves were not allowed to participate. So once slavery was abolished and the now freed slaves were able to participate in Carnival, they took back that word jab, which they were called by this white ruling class. And they used to call the black slave jab, meaning, oh, you're a devil, you're a bad person. And they kind of took back ownership of that word. And that's why they started painting themselves black, and they would open Carnival up with that expression of freedom, because they said, oh, you know what? If you think I'm a devil, I'll show you devil. I'm going to be free. That's why they have the chains that are broken to represent that freedom from bondage and everything. So it's a really fun thing to partake in. The music is amazing, and just the funness of having paint all over you and being in the street dancing.
Yeah.
But also it's just amazing because of the cultural significance that it has, and remembering our ancestors who weren't able to do stuff like this. And now we can, take back ownership of some of the negative things that were said about us and have fun with it, really.
That is beautiful. And I've participated in 2 carnivals. They both happen to be in Atlanta, Georgia, where I live. And you're right. It's this, I'm wearing feathers, I'm wearing glitter, I'm, in bright colors, and I'm dancing. And even dancing is this expression of freedom, right? And
Yes.
celebration. And it does pull a lot from the African roots, really, with the music and the soca and the dancing. And so I think it does give you kind of this powerful feel, right? And most of the islands do this. There is a common thread. Trinidad does it, Grenada, Dominican,
Yeah.
lots of islands do this. And it's amazing how different islands share that common thread, using the costumes and performances, really expressing that strength and that rebellion and that, that cultural pride. I think that is absolutely beautiful. And the other interesting thing about the costumes is that a lot of times they draw inspiration from animals, right? Like
Yeah.
you
Yeah, they do.
horns, feathers, right? And there is this cultural tie between how we as Caribbeans feel about animals being
Mm-hmm.
symbolizing strength, symbolizing power, symbolizing freedom and resilience, right? And how that all comes out on our in our costume, during one of the best
Exactly.
times of the year. So I think that that's beautiful.
Yeah, and I think we're so lucky to have some beautiful birds here that we can draw that inspiration
Yeah.
from too.
Yeah. So let's talk about food for a second. You mentioned that you like bus up shop, which I love. Another big part of the Caribbean culture is how animals are incorporated into food, right? So
Yeah.
whether that curried goat, I know that we eat a lot of goat in my family, though I love goats so much, but they're very
I know
tasty.
it's so it's so funny because my mom actually says she's a vegetarian, but whenever there's curry goat, she has some.
It's like the
She's like,
delicacy.
I'm a vegetarian until there's
Until this
curry
comes
goat.
out, right? We were always wanting my
Yeah.
grandmother to like, what is she cooking? If she made curry goat, it was a delicacy, right? And
Yeah.
then there's other foods like palau, seafood dishes. Like I know that I can't get into this, but my stepdad eats this all the time, bake and shark. So this cooked bread
Oh, yeah.
and shark, right?
And there's a whole debate, if that's actually shark or catfish or
Really?
some other type of... Yeah, because they're like, where are they getting
Shark?
shark from?
Maybe it is
Yeah.
catfish. Maybe it is catfish. People need to tell us
I don't
in
know.
the
I kind of
comments.
hope that it is.
Yeah, I don't know, but it's traditionally I'm always like, "What are you cooking?" And he's like, "Shark." I'm like, "Ugh, no, thank you." But yeah, again, just another way that the culinary traditions in the islands reflect cultural heritage, diverse cultural heritage. And a lot of people don't know that the islands are made up of so many different people, right? So it's not just people that look like you and I that are more African descent, but there's Indian, there's European, there's indigenous influences, and that's another beautiful blend, that you see in the Caribbean. You'll have a European we were talking about accents, having a deeper and better accent than you, right?
Yep.
so so that is beautiful. Okay, so we're going to close up in just a minute, but I do want to just touch on the veterinary perspective one more time. Veterinary
Yeah,
medicine
for
comes
sure.
with its own set of challenges. You happen to maintain a positive outlook. You just told me a little while ago that you love physiology, you love studying. But what are some of the challenges that you've encountered, and how do you stay motivated to face those challenges?
Well, I think a huge challenge for me before I started vet school was definitely financial because vet school is so expensive. Like I said, I went to university in Canada, and in Canada, university is subsidized. So I was just not used to at all seeing those types of prices for by semester, by year. So that was like a huge challenge that I had to overcome because I honestly just had to prove to myself that I was worth it. Because when I was applying, I was like, I don't think, am I worth this financial burden that I'm potentially placing on me for the rest of my life, placing on my future family or my current family? So that was a huge thing that I had to come to terms with because finances are really important, and they're really important starting off your career. And it's important because I know it's important because I hear a lot of veterinarians talk about the challenge that comes with loan repayment and all of that. So I think I just had to accept it. That was my approach with that. To be honest, like, yes, I could go into something else and not have gone to vet school and not have chosen this path, but it's something that I really want to do. And I'm so privileged and lucky that I do have access to funding and I still have the opportunity to become a veterinarian in the future. So I think for me, it was just accepting that, Eve, this is something that you want, and not everything that you want is gonna come easily, and things cost money, and that's what it is. And if
You
you
have
want
to
to
pay
do
for
this, then
things.
you gotta you gotta go on this path. So that was a huge thing. And I think it sucks that it's such a huge issue in the industry, but it's also nice that we're all going through it. Like, if you're a student who is also feeling this way and you're listening to this, just talk to some of your friends because they're going through the same thing. Talk to your professors because they've been there, or just talk to any vet that you know because, we've all been through similar things. And I think it's really nice having that community community and just knowing that we're all in the same boat. And hopefully one day it'll get better for those who come.
I'll say this, being now 16 years out of vet school, I will say this to you and to anyone in vet school right now or the younger vet, tackle your loans early. If you are coming out of vet school with a good amount of loans, tackle them early because you do not want to make that a lifelong bill, right?
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, once you get out of vet school and you start making money, you're like, okay, I'm going to do, 5 carnivals this year. Or I'm going to go, who am I traveling to see? You just make sure you put aside the first couple of years to really hone in and pay as much as you can on those loans.
Yeah, that's good advice.
I still have a lot of colleagues that are still paying for their
Hmm.
loans. And I have a colleague right now, she's maybe 4 years out. Her student loans are almost close to $500,000, So go for as many scholarships as you can and
Yes.
pay your loans back early. So Eve, as we wrap up, I do want to end with just asking, what would you like to share with our listeners? Anyone that's navigating their own cultural identities while pursuing a career in vet med or other animal related fields?
I think that the one thing I would want to say is just the importance of empathy. That's what I always try and remind myself of is just, you're not always going to be in situations that you completely understand, but you don't need to understand to have empathy. And I think that's a huge thing. Whether you're caring for animals or just talking to somebody, no matter who you are in this world and no matter what type of conversations that you're going to have with people, if you lead with empathy, I think that'll help not only yourself not hold on to as much negative feelings, but also just help the people that you're around. Because truly, we never know what somebody else is going through. And as veterinarians, we never really know what an animal is going through either. So empathy is huge for us.
And I actually am an empathy activist. So you have touched my heart with that statement. And
Oh, I love
you
that.
are like wise beyond your years, my friend. And thank you so much for sharing your insight and your culture with us on the podcast today. If those people that are hearing you today, they want to follow you and connect with you, where can they find you?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram. I'm on Instagram at Eve B Vet. And I'm also on TikTok as Eve B Vet at the same thing. So I kind of just post stuff. I post on TikTok more about my school life, and then I post on Instagram every now and then.
Okay.
But yeah, you can follow my journey.
Well, TikToker is for the new generation, so I will have to download TikTok now so that I can follow your vet life because I'm
Yes.
older and I'm still in the Instagram/Facebook era. Okay.
Oh.
Thank you, Eve, so much. And thank you all for joining us on Critters and Cultures, where we explore the deep connections between humans, animals, and the world around us. Remember, every person has a story, every creature has a story, and every culture has its wisdom. Until next time, stay curious, stay compassionate, and keep discovering the wonders of our shared world.
Thank you so much. Bye.